Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live webinars brought to you by the HOP platform. So HOP is a website that we hope all young people attending schools in Hertfordshire will be aware of. It stands for the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal, and it's a one-stop shop for you to find out lots of careers information and inspiration. And on the HOP site, you will find all of our previous webinars that we've recorded over the last couple of years. So there's over 50 on there now. So have a look through them. Have a look through them and share them with your friends as well, because they may well find something that they're interested in. The purpose of this webinar is to allow you to find out a little bit more about careers in policing, and specifically careers in policing with the Hertfordshire Constabulary. So I've got three fantastic panelists today who will be able to share not only their own experiences within policing, so there's a real range of level of experience here as well, but they will also be able to inform you about the recruitment process. So if you are thinking fairly imminently about joining the police, they'll be able to talk you through that process and everything that you need to know, including the sorts of skills and qualities that they're looking for, whether there are particular subjects you should be choosing, whether you need to go to university or not, and really they'll tell you what those experiences will be like. So whether this will be a career that will be something that you will be interested in. So first of all, though, what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of housekeeping. So this session is being recorded live. You should be able to see and hear us, but just for any of you watching this live, which is 4:30 on Thursday afternoon, we can't see or hear any of you, so don't worry about that. We are recording the session, so if you can't stay throughout the whole of the session, which will be just about an hour, it will be available to watch on our YouTube channel tomorrow, which I will share the link with you, is available on our HOP channel. So you'll be able to watch it back and you'll be able to share it with family and friends as well. We do want to get your questions, so this is your opportunity. So hopefully we'll cover a lot of the things that you'll be thinking or wondering already, but this is your opportunity to put your own questions to our panelists today. So anything that you hear mentioned today that you want to know a little bit more about, do put that question in. If there's any general questions you've got about policing, or you want to know about any of their experiences that aren't spoken about, then drop that into the question as well, because it's a really good way for you to find out, is this a career that I want to go into or not? The way that you do that is on your dashboard, on your screen, you should see there's a tab there that says questions. If you click on the questions tab, it opens out a text box. Within the text box, you can type in your question. It comes through directly to me, so no one else will see it, and then I will direct it to whichever one of the panelists you want to ask that question to. So if you want to ask it to anyone specifically, just put their name at the start of it, then I'll know to direct it to them. So do make the most of this opportunity to put your questions directly to our panelists. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to them and ask them just to give you a little bit of background about who they are and their particular role within the Hertfordshire Constabulary. So first of all, just going from my screen, I'm going to say very good afternoon to Sergeant Andrew Pardey. Good afternoon.
Hi everyone, yeah, I'm Sergeant Andrew Pardey. I am the Positive Action Recruitment and Retention Sergeant for Hertfordshire Constabulary. I'm joined by two of my team members here today. Our job is to basically not only to recruit officers, but to diversify policing to make it more representative of the communities that we serve. Glad to be here today.
Sure, and of course you've got a very extensive experience working in the Hertfordshire Constabulary as well, haven't you? Tell us, how long have you been in the Constabulary?
22 years, but it doesn't actually seem that long, honestly. The days go by really quickly because it's such an exciting and varied job, really. So yeah, a long time, but I've done a lot of things in that time that's made it quite exciting, including, you know, visits from the Queen, Buncefield exploding, London riots, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, yes, a very good job.
Just tell me, was it the first job that you had? Did you do it from leaving school? Did you do anything else in between?
No, I actually left with A-levels because I wanted to pursue an apprenticeship in aerospace technological design, and actually started an apprenticeship with that, but realised it wasn't the job for me. I needed something with a bit more meaning to it, and felt that I was making a difference.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll come back onto some of your experiences as we go on. Good afternoon, PC Shazia Malik.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in service for a little over 14 years as a police constable with Hertfordshire Police. Prior to working for Herts, I was a Metropolitan Police officer and police staff there as well. I much preferred the kind of family aspect of Hertfordshire hence I've stayed here for so long. And I'd echo what Sergeant Pardee said. Time fleets by so quickly. Sounds like a long time, but 14 years has passed so quickly, and I've done all manner of things. I worked on intervention, so they're the officers that go out and respond to the 999 calls, being on Safer Neighbourhood, dealing with like issues with community based problems, neighbourhood disputes at ASB, and moved around and finally found my way to the Positive Action team. I've been here for almost 2 years now. And again, echoing what Sergeant Pardee says, we're very much involved in trying to make sure our workforce is more reflective of our communities and as diverse as possible.
For sure, thank you. So some really interesting things there that we'll touch on. I'm particularly interested in the fact that you were formerly working for the Metropolitan Police as well. I'm sure plenty of people watching this will want to know the sort of comparisons between and why they might choose Hertfordshire over the Metropolitan or vice versa, perhaps. So then, good afternoon as well to PC Akib Iqbal. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Akib Iqbal. I've been working for Hertfordshire Constabulary coming up to 2 years now. In a short period of time, I've been a frontline first responder intervention, and then worked with an attachment with the S&T, which is the Safer Neighbourhood team, which deal with more kind of community-based kind of policing, whether it be local issues, antisocial behaviour, vandalism, and things along those lines. And now I'm part of the Positive Action team, where we've got a very specific remit, and we try and make our police force more reflective of the community that we serve. And yeah, just really enjoying this aspect of the policing role that I'm doing, whereby some of the other roles were very enjoyable in terms of being very dynamic and fast-paced. This aspect allows me to actually, slow down and actually have conversations with the community members that we deal with. And yeah, so far really enjoying it.
Sure. Okay. So I mean, I know firsthand that Shazia and Akib are doing a really sterling effort at the moment, going around and attending lots of events with lots of schools and groups of schools and young people at the moment to really inspire that next generation coming into the police constabulary. I don't know whether you can tell me. I should have asked you this off air, but are you able to tell us specifically which geographical areas in Hertfordshire are you, or have you previously worked in and served?
So I've been at Welwyn Garden City / Hatfield. They're the areas that I've served, and I'm currently at Welwyn Garden City headquarters at the moment with the current role that I'm in.
Sure. Okay.
For myself, I've worked in Bournemouth, St Albans, Hatfield, moonlighted in Watford for a little bit, as well as Stevenage, and now at Welwyn Garden City.
Sure. And Andy,
so I started off my career moons ago in St Albans, then moved to Hemel Hempstead, looking after Hemel Hempstead, Berkhamsted and Tring. I've worked in Rickmansworth, in Watford, but as a sergeant, we can get called to cover basically any station. We play station bingo, and I've covered probably every single area in Hertfordshire at one point or another. And Hertfordshire itself is immensely varied in its way, so every single station has a very different style of policing to it.
Sure. Okay. Well, but I've definitely got some questions I want to ask you about what you just said there, but I'm sure some of our attendees may do as well. So look, I'm going to hand over to Sergeant Pardee now. So I know you've got a presentation that you want to share with us. I think this will cover a lot of the questions that you've asked when you've registered to attend this event. So this is a really good sort of overview and context. So over to you.
Thanks. I think that's showing okay. Okay, so This presentation normally takes a bit longer than I've got today, so I'm going to rush through it and make sure that I concentrate on the stuff that's relevant to you all. I think the first thing to probably go through is the journey into policing. The application process can take around 4 to 5 months, sometimes a little bit longer. So you start off by registering your interest at our recruitment website, and then once your application is submitted, it's then checked for police eligibility, obviously to make sure you're not like a most wanted serial killer or a kingpin somewhere, and also you're checked against academic eligibility as well to make sure you've got the qualifications required, which I'll go on to in a second. Then the first exercise is an online SIFT event where you get asked for basically some competency-based questions, and you go through sort of like a behavioural sort of questionnaire that sort of ascertains what sort of ethics and values you're bringing into policing. And then you have an online assessment centre, which is 3 exercises online. And again, that will be a virtual interview online, again, about your ethics, values, decision making and skills that you bring to policing. There's a briefing exercise where you get given some information and asked how you deal with that information. And then there's also a written exercise, which is not as arduous as it sounds. After you've passed that online assessment centre, then there's an in-force interview, which is arranged by my team and I, where you're interviewed by 2 real people, police officers or members of staff, and they'll be asking you more stuff that's about more sort of Hertfordshire centric, specifically about Hertfordshire and the values and things along those lines. Once you pass the in-force interview, then you do your pre-employment checks. That's when they do like the extensive vetting, where they'll check your past criminal history, your relationship with other people, your economic status, and all that sort of stuff. And then you get your final offer, and then you have a start date. And believe me, although I said it takes about 5 to 6 months, it goes a lot quicker than you realise. And before you know it, you're in a classroom in a uniform, wondering where the time went. So it looks complicated, but my team and I are here to support you at every stage of that. We provide these insight events, which is actually what this presentation is part of, that just gives people an insight as to what to expect at the next stage. So there are 4 stages to go in. The first one is for degree holders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip that one because I don't think that was as relevant today, because it's for people who already have a degree. The other academic route into policing that was introduced at the beginning of last year is what's called the Police Constable Degree Apprenticeship, which is pretty much what we're here for about today, isn't it? So the apprenticeship for policing is a bit different to most other apprenticeships. You have to go through the application process we just mentioned, and then you basically start a 3-year probation where you're actually working as a police officer, learning by doing and earning at the same time. Now, previously, people may have done things like public services, qualifications, and things like that prior to joining the police. Now is the time to join the police, go onto the PCDA, and basically have your degree paid for you. So not only do you start working as a police officer and getting that experience and doing that amazing job, you get a good wage, you get a good pension, and at the end of the 3 years, you get your degree with no student debt, which is absolutely amazing. So that looks complicated, that screen where I've got there, but for most of you, it's only going to be the first section that's going to be really relevant. If you look at it, it's most basic. What you need to join policing now is maths and English at level 4, which I think is the old grade C in old terms. So grade 4 maths and English GCSE, and then basically 1 A level at grade C or above. So you need basically 32 UCAS points. If that's made up from 2 slightly lower A levels, 2 lower ranks, that's fine. But so if you think of it as most basic, GCSE maths and English grade C, and an A level at grade C, that's what you need to get in onto this. And it doesn't matter what what the A level's in. It doesn't have to be sort of relevant to policing. It could be in physics. It could be in geography, as long as it's an A level with that equivalent UCAS points. Those ones below are basically for people who probably are no longer in school. It's for people who've not got the UCAS points, but they've got experience in work outside of education. So when you start with us, you'll be getting paid £24,780 a year. You get an extra £2,500 a year for working in Hertfordshire. You don't get that in any other forces, and that's basically because we are basically quite next to Metropolitan Police area, so we get a lot of work in Hertfordshire as a result. But also the cost of living in certain parts of Hertfordshire that bound to London, a bit higher cost for living. So that's paid to sort of balance that out a little bit. So at the moment, until September, if heaven forbid you don't do so well at school and you don't get the sort of your A levels that you want or anything along those lines, until September, there are 2 non-academic routes into policing still available where you actually don't need any qualifications whatsoever. It's the older style that's being phased out in September in favour of the academic versions. The difference is that it's a 2-year probation rather than a 3-year, because you're not spending that 3-year earning a degree, because you don't get a qualification at the end of it. But at the end of the day, the pay is the same, as we're including that £2,500 bonus. And basically, you can get onto this route until September if you don't have the qualifications to get onto the academic route that I've just explained. The last route is basically what's called our Accelerated Detective Constable Programme. If you specifically want to become a detective constable in policing, then this is the route for you, where you can, again, this one doesn't require any qualifications and is only available till September. From September, the original route that I told you about, the PCDA, the Police Constable Detective Apprenticeship, on the 2nd year of that 3-year probation, you can say, I actually want to be a detective, and on your 3rd year, your portfolio is changed slightly so that by the end of the 3 years, you can qualify as a detective constable rather than as a standard police constable. Sounds confusing, but it's actually a lot simpler than I'm making it sound at the moment. I'm quite happy to take loads of questions about that. Okay, so once you get through the application process, you get through those stages that I just mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you then go on to 20 to 22 weeks of initial training at headquarters. So although the input is provided by Anglia Ruskin University, it's delivered by our learning and development team in Hertfordshire Constabulary. So although you are technically a university student, you're a police officer getting that university education in policing headquarters. So there's either at Wellingborough City, it may also be at Letchworth, which is our other educational establishment in Hertfordshire Constabulary. And it's all classroom based. It's talking about legislation, about law, about your advanced first aid and use of force and self-defense training. So that's your baton training, your PAVA, your unarmed combat and defense training. And then once you've done your initial 20 weeks where you have your legislation under your belt and stuff, you then go out for 15 weeks with a tutor constable. So that's a really experienced police officer who's already out there doing the job, and they basically are your partner for those 15 weeks, where you'll use that opportunity to go to jobs, gain that experience, to use it as evidence against your portfolio and your degree. So that's the real learning time there. So, you know, there'll be some onus on you to go, I want to go out to that job because it would be a great opportunity for me to learn X, Y, and Z skills. You will have a portfolio which makes it quite clear what they're looking for. So it'll be things like a safe arrest, use of communications, and things along those lines. So there will be things that you'll need to provide evidence against by going out and doing jobs with your tutor constable. So when you do go out on area, you do get this timetabled academic input. So there will be days where you're out on active duty. There'll be ring-fenced days where you'll have classroom-based inputs, and there'll be other ring-fenced days where you'll have the opportunity to record your evidence down against your portfolio and your degree. So it's all quite managed. However, it is challenging because you'll be going out to live police incidents as a police officer. You will have investigations and workloads to manage, and you'll also have the evidence that you need to submit towards your degree and portfolio. So it can be quite challenging. For that reason, as well as having a tutor constable, you'll also have what's called a PDU support as well, which is a professional development unit team. So you'll have another police officer whose sole job is to help you with that evidence and gaining that portfolio evidence for your degree. There is a final dissertation on a project or subject of your choice relevant to policing. So it might be dealing with antisocial behaviour in a certain area. It might be dealing with vulnerable victims of crime, things like that. So it'd be like a project dissertation towards the end of it. And at the end of it, like you said, you get your degree. If you come in on the degree holder things, it converts it to a diploma, but obviously you'll be coming for the apprenticeship, which gives you a degree at the end. And obviously you then get what's called your independent status at the end of your probation, which is basically where say you are now qualified to go out, if necessary, on your own as a police officer, and you know what you're doing. Okay, so I think it's important to note, you may or may not be aware, police officers can't strike, and that's because we're not employees. We're quite unique. We don't have a contract of employment, and we're not basically a standard employer like anyone else. We hold an office. So we're sworn into office, where we make a pledge to the Queen and to our communities, and we are sworn into the office of constable, and we're considered to be servants of the Crown. Obviously, we're granted powers to detain, arrest, search, use lawful force, seize things and stuff like that, and that's quite extensive powers, including like the ultimate power, and that's to deprive someone of a basic human right of their liberty. So we can detain someone or arrest someone if we suspect that they've committed an offence. And for that reason, we're held to quite a high level of accountability, rightfully so as well, because one of the reasons why police officers in the UK are so highly respected the world around, and actually by the community at large, despite the stuff that's been going on recently, is because we are members of the community. So Robert Peel, when he founded policing, he made it quite clear that the public are the police and the police are the public. So we're not above our communities, we're part of the communities that we serve. So therefore, if we fall below the high level of service that they have a right to expect, we should rightfully be held to account publicly so that people don't lose the trust in the police officers that are supposed to serve them. Because if we lose that trust, then we can't do our jobs. So the other great thing about this career, which I can't sell enough because it's just so unique to policing, is that once you're out of your probation, your 3-year probation after doing your apprenticeship, the world is your oyster. So you have a real choice of roles you can go into. As soon as you're into that 3 years, you can apply to become a dog handler, a firearms officer, to be in the helicopter unit, to be anti-terrorism, to become a detective and go on to fraud units, deal with murders, major crimes, cyber crime, all that sort of stuff. So those are primary roles you can be. So literally, if I wanted to, tomorrow I could apply to become a dog handler. But in addition, there's also what's called tertiary skill sets you have as well. So I'm here today because I'm the recruitment sergeant, but I'm also something that's called CBRN trained, which is chemical, biological, radioactive, and nuclear. So people might remember the Novichok incident a couple of years ago where the people were poisoned with that quite deadly thing, and you had police officers turning up in the hazmat suits. I'm one of them police officers. But because those incidents don't happen every day, you don't have a permanent team of those officers. You have officers like myself who have a day job, and then we have that additional skill. And if an incident like that happens, I can get called up tomorrow to go and deal with that incident. So there's been a couple of times I've been on duty doing training or on intervention, and I've been called to a chemical spill or a biological incident and had to put that kit on. And the same goes with the London riots. So I was called a PSU, as what you and I would know as riot police officers, but I was a medic. So when the London riots happened, I received a phone call at the end of my shift saying, "You're needed over in London." And I was over there providing first aid to police officers, to victims that have been caught up in the riots, but also to rioters as well. So there was so much variety, and you're not stuck in any one role either. So like has been mentioned by my teammate here, I started off as a safer neighbourhood team officer, and then went on to intervention. I'm now in recruitment. Tomorrow I could apply to be a dog handler if I so wished and get through that recruitment process. And you can change throughout your career so that no 2 days are the same. And if for whatever reason you decide that you want to change or to develop a particular skill, you can do that. And as you know, additionally, you can have these other skills such as, like I said, the CBRN training that I was talking about, the public order training and stuff like that as well. It's really is no other job that provides that amount of variety. And of course, there's all the sexy stuff people like, so the fast car driving and training and using tasers and stuff like that as well. So there's different levels of driver training. You start off with what's called a utility license, which is driving within the laws, and you only use your blue lights when you're stopping or pulling over a vehicle. Then you've got your response training, which is driving on blue lights and you're able to exceed the speed limit if it's safe to do so to get to emergencies. Then you've got pursuit, initial phase pursuit officers. They're the ones that will actively chase other vehicles. And then you get your really high level sort of royal protection sort of officers who can do things like J turns and reversing at 70 miles an hour down a one-way street like James Bond. So there's all those different levels of driving skills as well. And like I said, you can apply, once you're at your probation, you can apply to do things like taser training, method of entry training, which is, see people putting doors in for warrants and things like that as well. So there's lots of other skills and that available out there. And one of the things I'll mention now in relation to why Hertfordshire is a better choice than Metropolitan Police in relation to these things is because in the Met being so large, at the moment, if you wanted one of these additional skills or to add these things to your remit, the average wait in the Met is 4 years. In Hertfordshire, the average wait is probably about 12 months. It's not quick by any means, but that's because, we've still got people to train. But obviously that development and that, our investment in you is a lot quicker in Hertfordshire. So basic information for police constables. So you'll be doing, you say it's full-time employment, obviously. So it's about 40 hours a week and it is shift work. But again, because policing is not like any other job, there's lots of overtime available, and it will be what's called, they call it dynamic overtime. But basically what that means is that you could get to the end of a very busy day, and 5 minutes before you go home, a major incident will come in. You'll be expected to go to that, and you may not get off until 4 or 5 hours later. And the same goes as if you've arrested someone for a major offence and you're waiting in custody to book your prisoner in. You can't just go, "It's time for me to go home, see you later." You'll be seeing that process through. So they have to get used to calling up your partner, your parents, or whoever saying, "I'm going to be late again." And my wife knows that if she gets a phone call within half an hour of me due to finish, that I'm calling up to say I'm going to be late. So we work on shifts. So we have early, lates, and nights. So earlies are generally 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Lates are 3 in the afternoon until midnight. And nights are 10 in the evening until 7 in the morning. Those can change sometimes depending what team you're on. So safer neighbourhood team officers won't do full nights. They'll do what's called half nights. And also if you're on a late on a Friday or Saturday and you're dealing with all the people in the pubs and clubs, your shift might be finished a little later than midnight. We do get enhanced pay rates for working at these social hours. So if you are on duty between 8 in the evening and 6 in the morning, you get an enhanced pay rate for that. And we also, we do get, like I said, that good overtime as well. So I think I've already covered that. So, one of the things that's worth pointing out here is that there are maybe embargoes due to national events or major disasters. So in Hertfordshire, we very often have the summits, the sort of world leaders summits, and they very often happen in Watford. And when that happens, there's lots of extra policing to be put on. So they'll give you quite a bit of notice, but they'll say between these dates and these dates, you're not allowed to apply for any leave. Now, if you've already got leave booked, that'll be allowed, but you may not be allowed to book leave within those periods of time because they need basically everybody available for those resources. Remember, we had the whitewater rafting events during the Olympics was in Hertfordshire, so we were kept on for that. And also when Buncefield oil depot blew up, obviously everybody in the Constabulary was kept on. But to be fair, everybody in the Constabulary wanted to stay on because that's what we joined for. You know, it was a major incident to make sure people were safe. It was also quite exciting, but there may be times where you're asked to stay on. And obviously you get extra leave hours, so extra holiday you can take increases every year, as does your pay. So every year you'll get an increase in pay, increase the amount of time you can take off as well. I've already covered this about the wide variety of roles, but there's a bit more here. So firearms officers, airport and anti-terrorism patrols, because we cover Luton Airport along with our Bedfordshire colleagues. Like I said, traffic officers, motorcycle officers, undercover pursuit vehicles, dog handlers. There's loads of different types of dogs. I didn't know this. So there's drugs dogs, money dogs, body recovery dogs, general purpose dogs. And what was the other one? It was digital media dogs. So they can find things like little tiny camera chips and things like that that you store data on. You can find those hidden in the middle of a field. It's amazing. We've also got MPAS, which is National Police Air Service Officers. So they're the helicopter police officers, but we also have airplanes as well. Not many people know that. And if you want to become a detective, you've got major crime, which deals with like murders and significant rapes and things like that. Gangs and organised crime that deal with all the drug trafficking gangs, cybercrime, covert surveillance, people trafficking, sex exploitation, anti-terrorism, and lots of specialist operations as well. And these are the additional skills I was talking about CBRN. You've got specialist search officers. So you might see sometimes on the news thing when someone's missing, you'll see a line of police officers walking along the field looking for stuff. So they're specially trained police officers. You've got your right police officers I was talking about. Spotters, which go to football matches to spot people that might be banned from matches or might be violent offenders. And you've got protest liaison officers that deal with things like large-scale riots or protests and stuff like that. And they'll be there to keep the communication between policing and the protests to make sure that it's peaceful and that other people aren't affected by them. I think it's only fair to say about the realities of policing as well. We are very often the first responders to many traumatic incidents, including suicide, murders, unexpected deaths, car accidents, domestic and child abuse, public order events, large-scale riots, exploitation of the vulnerable elderly, and neglect and self-harm. But that is very much counterbalanced by the good things. I, for example, have been involved in the birth of 2 children on the roadside on the A41 in Hemel Hempstead, saved countless lives, and gained a sort of justice for child victims of sexual offences, holding their hands in court whilst their abuser is sentenced to life and things like that. So there are, for every victory in policing, it makes up for a month of bad shifts. But it would be unfair of me not to mention these things because it is the reality of policing. Obviously, we look after the mental well-being of our officers. There's lots of things like their trauma risk incident management officers, our occupational health unit, staff support networks and chaplains, and well-being champions. I also have PTSD, but because I've had support from these things in my policing career, I'm still able to do the job I love, whilst make sure my mental well-being is looked after. We're aware, obviously, that cost of living is a big issue at the moment, but we have lots of things that can help us with the cost of living. We get a lot of discounts on things like house insurance, car insurance, buying cars. We can get lots of money off on food. ASDA does a lot of discounts for emergency service workers. And there's lots of things that you can get there to help with the cost of living as well. And obviously there's lots of social events as well. We've got loads of football team. We've got a football team, a rugby team, archery team, fishing team, darts team, the whole lot. So you can socialise that way. And we have a sports and social club that can provide discounted holidays, whether that's in Germany, where I went to a couple of times, or we've got lodges we own in Haven, holiday camps. And there's lots of social events at headquarters. And also we provide a forced lottery. And then in the December one, you can also win a car if you're the top winner of the lottery. It's amazing. So there's lots of social events there as well, because you will make friends for life in policing, and the opportunity to socialise amongst your colleagues and the families of colleagues is always there as well. I won't go on to this too far because I know that it's nearly time for me to finish. But my team and I are here with the Positive Action Recruitment team. So we're not here to provide beneficial support to people with protected characteristics. We're here to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity to get into policing as everyone else. So some people may come across barriers that other people may not have to experience. Say, for example, dyslexia, and may be worried about exams, about the online sort of things like that. We can provide support to give them the same opportunities as everyone else to get in. And the same goes for people who might be worried about misogyny, racism, homophobia in the police. We can talk to you about that. We also have a positive action buddy scheme where we'll partner you up with a positive action mentor, who is someone who shares the protected characteristic, that will be able to give you advice as to the challenges they faced, how they overcome them, the support that they gained, and obviously provide an insight into where they are now, to let you know that things like race, gender, sexual orientation aren't a barrier to a career in policing, and also are not a barrier to promotion or those specialist roles that we're talking about. That's what my team are all about, because we need policing to diversify, because people need to recognise that they're understood and represented in policing, and that's what my team are all about. But we want everybody and anybody to join policing, so it's not that we give priority to people who tick a box. That's not how it works. But my team are here to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to get in. Okay, I rattled through that. I think I did all right. I think that was just half an hour, wasn't it?
You did well, yeah. Lots of very, very good information on there as well, and it's generated a number of questions actually that have come in already. So I am going to get onto those questions, I think, straight away. Before I do that, let me just have a look and see which ones have come in. Okay, right then. So some of these looks like they've probably already been answered within the presentation. So let me just open these out. So there's a question about how long the training will be, but I think you then went on to talk about that one. So I'm just going to ask these in the order they come in. Will the ACDP, excuse me, be available for students finishing their A-levels in 2023?
So the PCDA, so we've got to make sure we're talking about the right things. So the PCDA is the academic one I was talking about, where you require those 2 GCSEs in the A-level. That's going to be here forever. The ADCP, the Accelerated Detective one, that ends in September. However, this gets so confusing because it's the same initials but rearranged. The PCDA that I was talking about, like I said, in year 2, at the end of year 2 of your 3-year probation, you have the opportunity to say, I'm interested in becoming a detective. And then if you do that in your last year of that 3-year probation, your input is changed slightly so that at the end of your 3 years, you are basically directed to becoming a detective constable rather than a standard police constable. So sure. even though the ADCP phases out in September, you'll still be able to pursue a detective role through the PCDA route that's been introduced.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to segue into the next question. How old do you need to be for the detective program?
Okay, so that's the same for any role in policing. You can actually apply to policing from the age of 17 and a half, but you can't start as a police officer until you're 18, and that's because we recognise the recruitment process takes about 5 to 6 months. So you can start your application as soon as you're 17 and a half, and you can also apply with predicted grades as well. So, you know, if you apply with predicted grades, what happens is we can do your application to a certain point, then we'll wait for your actual grades to come through to make sure they meet the criteria, and then we can continue on. So
yeah, okay. And then should you apply during sixth form if you want to do a degree apprenticeship, like at the same time everyone is applying for uni? So I think that's a really important question actually to answer. When would you recommend that someone starts looking at the application? What's the sort of timescales involved?
Well, I'd suggest, obviously, if you've reached that age, at 17 and a half, you know, do it as soon as you can. And like I said, where people normally were looking at doing degrees before coming into policing, you may as well come straight into policing and get that degree paid for you, because you will get a degree that is transferable outside of policing as well. It doesn't just, you know, count for inside policing. You know, that it's about £9,000, isn't it, a degree at the moment? I think it works out as. And so at the end of that 3 years, not only do you have three years worth of wages you've earned, you've had 3 years of already being a police officer, you've also got your degree under your belt and no student debt, which is unheard of nowadays. And, you know, I'm paying for a degree of my own at the moment, and I know how much that can damage belts. So, but if you do want to do a degree before joining policing, there is means to do that as well. But I'd highly recommend, if all you want to be basically at the end of it is a police officer in any of the roles I've talked about today, then coming through the PCDA route, and, you know, as soon as you're able to do so from 17 and a half upwards.
Yeah, so to clarify, it's 17.5 when you can put your first application in, or is that when you would be taken on?
So 17.5 is when you complete your first application in. Then obviously you go through that journey that I showed at the beginning. By the end of it, you'll be about 18 by the time you get to join anyway.
Of course. Okay, so for all of you watching, that means you're almost certainly going to be in year 13 by the time that you can apply. I mean, is it possible? Can you access the application process in advance of that, just so you can sort of prepare yourself for doing that yet?
Absolutely. I'm very aware that I'm speaking and Shez and Akib haven't had a chance to get in. But
I've got some questions for them, don't worry.
One of the things I can do is I can provide something that we produce called the insight document, and our insight document literally breaks down every single question in the application form for you, including all the additional information bits. But yes, absolutely you can. I mean, if you were to do so now, but obviously if you put in that you are under 17.5, then it might not let you go any further. But what I can do is I can provide you with that insight document, which has got everything to do with the application form in it if necessary, and you can circulate that to people who are interested.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fine. Well, let me direct some of these questions to Shazia and Akib. So, well, Shazia, I'm going to ask you this one because you said that you previously worked in the Met. So the question is, do you get paid more in the Met or in Hertfordshire? But perhaps you could expand that answer just to talk about what are the differences, what are the sort of pros and cons of each, particularly for someone living in Hertfordshire.
Well, you do certainly get paid more in the Metropolitan Police. There's no other way to explain that away, really. The reason why I applied to Hertfordshire over the Metropolitan Police were for some of the reasons that Sergeant Pardey's already explained. We're a smaller force, and on account of that, we're probably more cohesive. We work closer together, and because of that, sometimes when you do apply for a posting, you're probably in the running with a very small number of applicants. So your odds of getting that promotion or moving into a specific specialism is more likely. Plus, you're likely to do that at a quicker rate. So often we do have people transferring from the Met to Hertfordshire for that very reason. For myself, I quite like the fact that I can walk into pretty much most Hertfordshire police stations and know members of staff there. And it's just that all-inclusive aspect, and your kind of reputation precedes you, and that's quite nice. And people are always there to help you. You can pick up a phone, and if you don't know that immediate person, the likelihood is that you have a mutual friend. So it makes working a little bit easier and nicer, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, is it also worth pointing out that if you're working in the Met, so if you're in London, you might get paid more, but also you got to travel down there, and I don't know how much control you get. I mean, obviously, if you're in somewhere like Enfield or Harrow, you're probably not too far away. But I don't know whether you like to get posted into Westminster or South or East London.
I did work the other way, so I lived in Bedfordshire and was working for the Met. So the travel time does take time out of your day, to be quite honest with you. Plus, you've got the aspect of if your shift overruns, because you've had a later rest, and it does impact on your kind of work-life balance. So for me, it was a better solution to work closer to home. In terms of travel expenses, I know that the Metropolitan has some kind of contingency with Oyster cards and the costings involved in that. So I couldn't really comment much on that, to be fair, because this was brought in after my time with the Met. But we certainly have concessions, and at the moment we're trying to negotiate a concession with Thameslink Govia, which is probably the main link for lots of Hertfordshire officers into London. But we do get the trains and the tubes TfL without payment upon presentation of our warrant cards. So that's still in place. So that's definitely a perk for joining Hertfordshire Police.
What I would say is that in this year, we've had 2 officers leave for the Met, but we've had 9 come from the Met to Hertfordshire. And we all know that at the moment the Met are offering that extra £5,000 to everybody. After tax, that goes down to £3,000, and that £3,000 goes very quickly. And the main reason we get people coming back is although they're paid slightly more, the cost of living in London and the cost of commuting into and from London is a lot more, and they actually find they're worse off than if they'd stayed in Hertfordshire. And as Shaz was saying, the train commissions in in the Met, they have to pay £70 a month from their own wages to get an Oyster card to allow them train travel within a certain radius of London. Actually, the travel agreement for Hertfordshire is actually better than that. It's wider than that, and it costs us nothing. We don't have to pay anything into it. And that's for on and off duty as well. So, you know, if you're going into London on a day off to meet friends and stuff like that, you can still use your card to do that. It doesn't have to be whilst you're on duty. So actually, that travel commission is actually a lot better than the Met.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask the next two questions to Akib then, as he's been sitting there very, very patiently. So the first one, because I know it's only fairly recently that you've gone through the recruitment process. So the question is, do you have to do a physical exam? So what can you remember, Akib, about the requirements around your sort of physical condition?
So yeah, you do have to do a physical examination. It's you have to get a medical as well from your doctor, which goes through your kind of health conditions, and it kind of covers your whole medical history. I know different surgeries charge a different amount for that medical, but in terms of the actual fitness, there's a bleep test you have to do. You have to get to level 5.4, which, if you've got a reasonable level of fitness, is very achievable, but people still do fail it. So it's something that, you know, again, where we can actually support individuals, where we can set up a little mock test in one of our gymnasiums, and you know, we can set that up to allow people to kind of practice it, because it does catch people out. But in terms of the physical, that's the only thing that you know you have to do. There was the other in years gone by where you'd have to do like a physical kind of strength test and things like that, but that's not part of the process anymore.
Andy, can you remember what's the current specifications of that physical test? I mean, I can remember when I applied many years ago, it was all about the bleep test, which of course everyone hates.
Well, it's 5.4 now, as Aki was saying, which even 22 years in and in my current state, I could probably still pass with a bit of effort. It used to be 7.2, used to be incredibly a lot higher. I used to have to do like slalom run tests and strength tests and things like that. But in reality, those things have been mitigated by other advances in technology that we have available to us and policing styles. So really, the only physical examination you have is the bleep test. But along with that, you'll also have medicals in relation to your eyesight and your hearing and things like that as well. And again, all of that is in the insight document I can send you, including a link on a YouTube video to actually practice the bleep test at home if you so wish, if you've got the right length, obviously, to mark between two cones. So you can actually practice at home. But like Arkib and Charles were saying, one of the things we do, because we know that sometimes it can be a barrier to some people, so you can do those mock events as well, that people can come and have a practice before they do it for real.
Sure. Okay. Well, in fact, I'm quite intrigued about this one. Do you have to get? I presume this. I'm going to read this and assume it's and take it literally. Do you have to get tasered to use a taser?
No, not anymore. No, I'm joking. No, you've never had to be tasered to do it. So it's. I don't know whether some Americans do it for whatever reason, but we don't. There used to be a case of you used to have to be exposed to parva. But that's in days gone by, and again, because of advances in parva and how it's been used, the spray is less likely to cross-contaminate the person actually expelling it, so we don't have to go through that anymore. So no, there's no tasering or parva or any other sort of rite of passage.
John, there's a number of questions, and there always is, about tasering. So have any of you got any direct experiences of it? This is something that's relatively new, isn't it? I don't know, 20 years ago. Tasering.
It's a lot safer than people think it is. So the way the taser works is actually two barbs. So it come out onto two barbs, and they're generally about 1.5 foot separate, and basically it's a charge passes between the 2 points. And generally what they try and do is they'll try and do it at the trunk of the body, because what it does, it makes the muscles contract. So a lot of people seem to think, it has something to do with stopping the heart or something like that. It actually makes the muscles contract and actually debilitates the person that way, because they'll then fall over in a controlled manner because their muscles are all tightened up and contracted. As a supervisor, I've had to deal with officers that have discharged them because there's a massive accountability, again, like we were saying before about being held accountability. So, a supervisor will come out after one has been discharged, the taser is seized, everything like that. There's all these little tiny things they're called aphids, but basically little dots that identify the cartridge that was used, the taser that was used. That'll be booked out to a user. So there's an awful lot of sort of evidential criteria there. We only use them as a last resort. I don't think I've ever heard of an example of a dry stun being used, which is where they're being used without the barbs being discharged. It's actually used as almost like a stun gun. So, you know, and that's basically because obviously police officers are trained in talking about communications, de-escalating through comms and stuff like that. Our most effective weapon is still our voice. But on the occasions that it does get used, it's very effective. And actually, it's a lot safer than a lot of people have you believe, especially the media.
Sure. Shazia and Akib, have you had any experience of this beyond your training?
Not in the sense of an actual taser, but we had in our personal safety kind of research that we have every year, they did have a session where they involved a knife that had in effect a very low stun level, and the reason they used that was to, when you were learning how to deflect a knife attack away from yourself, if you did get stunned mildly, you knew that that was the equivalent of you being cut. So that's my only experience, and that was enough of a buzz for me to know that, yeah, I wouldn't really want to experience a higher voltage. It was, yeah, it was interesting. It made you jump out your skin, but it was fine.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm a related question. I'll go to you first of all, Akib, on this one. But what's the most traumatic situation you've had to deal with?
The most traumatic, the one that comes to mind is where I actually arrested a high-risk kind of domestic abuse individual who was kind of, long story short, was kind of his partner was kind of controlling, coercive behavior, physical and as well as mentally kind of inflicting damage to her. So arrested the individual, took him through to custody, and then he was released on bail, and then he went missing. And then when someone goes missing, it's quite all hands on deck. Everyone goes out looking for the missing person. So as part of that search, we actually did locate him, but we found him in woods hanging from a tree. So it was a strange experience because on the one hand, you know, we were arresting him for for the crimes that he was alleged to have committed, and then just remembering that, you know, at one point I was here, took him into custody, and then the next you find out that he's, committed suicide. So it was that was probably the one that kind of just sticks out to me straight away. But yeah, you have kind of lots of little incidents like that. But as Sergeant Pardee mentioned, we do have things in place, you know, where we can, address the mental health issues and things like that. So.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, let me just try and uplift the tone a little bit. What's the most ridiculous situation you've ever been called out to? There's probably a few that come out.
Ridiculous.
I've got a good one. So we've got a timber yard in Hemel Hempstead, and we were informed that one of their truck drivers was banned from driving, but it was suspected that he was still doing his day job and still driving truck despite being banned, and it was for something quite serious at the moment. It's like death by dangerous driving, and he was on bail for it. So we were given a description of the male and his name, and a couple of officers driving past the wood yard when a bloke matching his description, lo and behold, was driving out of the yard in one of their trucks. Sure enough, they pulled him over. They asked for his name. He gave the name that they were waiting for, and they arrested him for driving whilst disqualified. Now, people are normally quite upset when they get arrested for those things, but this person was beside himself, quite apoplectic with his rage, but he eventually calmed down. But it was only when he was taken into custody and told that they were going to take fingerprints to confirm his identity that he eventually came clean. Now, he was actually the boss of the timber yard, who had been banned from driving about 2 years previously, and because he knew he was banned from driving, gave the details of one of his employees, not knowing that he was also banned from driving. So he did see the funny side of it at the end, but yeah, that was quite funny.
And Shazia, I'm guessing you're always, when you're called out you've got an idea of what the case might be. Are there any that come up? I don't know whether they're a code or not. And you think, oh, why have I got to deal with this again? Is there anything that comes to mind?
We get called out to lots of incidents that end up being civil disputes, lots of bin disputes. People don't like people moving bins, low-level stuff that soon, albeit it isn't criminal in its immediate instance, it's got the capability of becoming criminal, whereby people start off just moving the bin, and then it's words exchanged, then it's abusive words exchanged, and then there's that escalation. So we, especially whilst I was on the Safer Neighbourhood, we realised that we needed to get behind complaints, even if they started off as civil. Lots of agreements being made between parties was really important, because, to be fair, neighbourhood disputes tend to be the ones that tend to last the longest, and once they become quite personalised and vindictive, that's where things can go wrong quite rapidly. So definitely those kind of jobs, they come in initially and you might think it's just a bin dispute, but yeah, they can soon escalate.
Sure. Okay. There's a couple of questions that are coming about becoming a detective, actually, or detective work. Let me ask you. Let me just. We are sort of getting towards the last 10 minutes. So if you've got any more burning questions that you want to ask, do get them in now. We'll make sure that we get those answered for you. So let me just read both of these questions, and then you can answer them. So, A, what is the best route to take to become a detective? And then, if you go into detective work, will you be changing stations as much as you do when you're an officer? So if I go to you, Andy, for that one, because I know you've spoken as a sergeant, you often will cover different stations.
So actually, just to make a confirmation, when you become a police officer, even a standard police officer, you'll get given an assigned station that you work from. So, you know, when you come out of your initial training, you'll actually get asked your 3 preferred areas that you want to be stationed at, and very often, 95% of the time, you'll get your first choice, and that will be your home station. You'll look after that area. So, like I said, I've worked in Hemel Hempstead for most of my career. When you're a detective, it really depends on what department you work on as to where you'll be going. So someone who's maybe basically on like a case investigation team or a local crime unit, they'll be very much like police officers. They'll be allocated a station they work from, dealing with crimes that come in that local area. However, if you're on someone like the covert surveillance unit, or our operational support group, they do all like sort of, as it stands, like the plainclothes observational data. Maybe they'll be looking at drug gangs and things like that undercover. They may get called to various parts in Hertfordshire and also neighbouring forces to work in partnership with them. But generally, you'll get given notice about it. It all really much depends on the type of department you're going into. So say, for example, if you're dealing with like gangs and stuff like that, you'll be working in collaboration with detectives from other forces as well. It may require you going over there, working with them, but you'll still have an allocated station at which you're based at. So it depends on the role, but generally you'll have a station you work from.
Yeah. Okay. And did becoming a detective appeal to any of the 3 of you? I mean, Shazia, is that something you'd like to go into?
I've been pushed a fair bit over my service to do the TI programme, but for me at this moment in time, I quite like moving laterally. I think I probably will have a 5-year plan at some stage and might bite the bullet. I do find it interesting, but I think the thing with Hertfordshire is you keep your workload yourself, so you do investigate crime. You do pretty much lots of things that a detective would do. Perhaps the type of crime you are investigating might be low level. It might even be a series of shopliftings, for argument's sake. So you do get to experience a lot of what the detectives do, which when I was in the Met, I didn't have the capability of doing. And I dealt with lots of investigations, start through to finish, ended up in court, secured convictions. So it's a great service to get an all-rounded experience.
Sure. Okay. And then follow up. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say I do an awful lot of work with SO15 and anti-terrorism detectives. Even in my current role as a sergeant, I work a lot with them and provide evidence for cases. That side of the detective world is really interesting to me. It might be something I'll pursue further on in my career, the anti-terrorism side of stuff.
Okay. So questions coming. So can I apply for the detective program at 17 if I turn 18 in 7 months' time? There's lots of numbers in that. So I think we're saying applications have to start at, well, 17 years and 6 months. So you've got to be 17 and a half before you submit your first application.
Yeah, so just to confirm, there's 2 routes to become a detective at the moment. There's a ADCP one, that accelerated detective one. That's the one that requires no qualifications, but that's being phased out in September. So the likelihood is, I'm not sure what age sort of the crowd are that we're addressing today, but it sounds like a lot of you will probably have to take the PCDA route and select for the detective route in the 3rd year of your probation.
Yeah, okay. Generally, do you find, because you will see a lot of the new intake that come in, is that a desirable outcome for lots of them to go and become a detective, or are there other areas of policing that they go into? Or
to be fair, every single thing you do in policing has its own speciality. Everybody will find their niche in policing. There is so much variety that someone will find something that's just right for them. The reason I'm in the role that I do now is because I love everything about equality and diversity, and I'm very much into that. But there will be people who are very much into their computers, cybernetic and stuff, and they'll find a niche in cybercrime. There may be people who are really involved in sort of like the high adrenaline sort of thing of covert surveillance. So there are so many different roles. Really, that you can find your niche into.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, I've had 2 more questions in, which are probably really good roundup questions, actually. So firstly, and this is such an important question to ask, actually, what makes an application stand out?
It's a really, really good question. So one of the things I would say is coming to our events will help it stand out, but there's an understanding of something called the competencies and values framework. Now, again, that's in the insight document I can send you. So almost everything they're looking for is based on competencies and values that are sort of explained within that diagram. And they're looking for things like honesty and integrity. They're looking for team working. They're looking for people who are going to take the initiative. People who can make decisions quickly, and people who seek feedback and things along those lines. So having an understanding of the competencies and values framework is really valuable to succeeding at every stage through the application process. And that's why we do these insight events, which this training package I just gave you today was part of. So if you go onto the application journey and you get in contact with our team, we'll invite you to these events prior to every stage. And that will really help you because it goes through that competencies and values framework, let you know what they're looking for, what they're expecting. It's quite common sense, really. It's what you'd expect from a police officer, someone who's honest, someone who works well with others and things like that. You just need to be able to express that in what you're doing when you go through the application process. The new application form is a lot simpler. It used to be really complicated. It used to be asked about competency-based questions right from the start, but the new application form is actually a very simplified, basic application form, and then they look for that information further on in the exercises afterwards.
Sure. Okay.
I think the other thing is probably, the other thing worth mentioning is an understanding of the code of ethics, and also for it to be in line with your thinking. So the code of ethics underpins how we conduct ourselves both whilst at work and off duty as well. So the 9 principles are honesty, accountability, integrity, respect, fairness, leadership, openness, objectivity, and selflessness. And as you can see, if you take any one of those components away, you couldn't police correctly, justly, or potentially even legally. So having an understanding of them, those principles would also set an applicant in a good stead for the assessments that come through the recruitment process.
Yeah, no, sure. And a follow-up question to that, though. What work experience would you recommend getting? So is there anything that's going to help someone understand what a career in policing would be like, and anything that I guess that therefore make their application stand out a little bit more?
So a couple of things I can recommend is there's always police cadets. If up to that age of 17, I think you can be a cadet. Also, we offer things called ride-alongs, so you can actually apply to come out for a ride-along with officers and actually see what that's like firsthand. And things like your public services degrees and that do give you an insight into policing. So those are always good as well. So there's quite a few things you could do, but what we try and get across is that actually a lot of the skills that are equivalent to policing also exist in other areas. So one of my first jobs when I was still in school was working as a barman behind the bar. But with that, I learned how to talk to people who are intoxicated, to de-escalate fights, things along those lines. Those things are all valuable to policing. So really, you can bring those everyday skills into policing, and almost everything has some relevance to what we do because the job we do is so varied.
For sure. Okay, well look, it's just gone 5:30, so I'm gonna wrap up there. Just say anyone who's watching this, so particularly those of you watching this live, if you live in sort of Broxbourne or Hertford or this side of the county, then next Wednesday you might want to come along to a careers event at the Spotlight Theatre in Hoddesdon that both Shazia and Akib will be attending as one of the exhibitors. It's called Generation Broxbourne. There'll be a whole host of employees from a range of different industries that will be attending that event, and as I say, Akib and Shazia will be there, so you can ask them some questions and talk to them a little bit more about careers in policing at the same time. On your screen at the moment, you can see all of our HOP channels again. So if you're not already subscribed to them or you're not following us, do follow those at the moment. The QR code right bang in the middle of the screen, if you take a picture of that, that will take you directly through to the Hertfordshire Police Constabulary's careers website. So a lot of the information that we've covered here today, you'll be able to access. I dare say you'd probably find the application process within there as well. So do take a moment just to take a photo of that and to remind yourself of that. The QR code in the top left corner of your screen will take you back to all the previous webinars that we've delivered over the last couple of years, some of which might be directly relevant. I mean, Sergeant Pardy, this is his second appearance on one of our careers webinars. He came along to one probably about 18 months ago with a couple of your other colleagues as well, which I think included an undercover detective actually. So that was very interesting. Right. So if that's something that you're interested in, do go back and find that one and watch it, and you'll find some slightly more different information. If I could ask any of you that are watching this live, just within the questions, so thank you so much for submitting your questions. We always want to hear your feedback. So if there's anything you found particularly interesting today, or you found this session really informative or inspiring, please just drop your comments on there, because we'll use these to promote webinars again in the future. Just whilst you're doing that though, firstly, let me thank those of you, particularly those of you that watched this session live and you've contributed to it with asking some really, really thoughtful questions. So from your perspective, I really do hope that you found this session really useful. But more so, can I thank our three fantastic panelists for joining us today. So to Shazia and to Akib, you wouldn't believe the amount of perseverance they've had to get the technology right from joins this session today, so really, really do appreciate that. And of course to Sergeant Pardy as well for giving up his time for us today. So thank you guys, thank you for joining us. Your stories and experiences have been incredible today. I've really enjoyed hearing them, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. So for the rest of you, best of luck with your future careers. Hopefully lots of applications in the next few years will be landing on Sergeant Pardy's desk from those of you watching it today. So best of luck with your future careers and have a very good evening.